Chris, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
Good, good. Hey, welcome. Thanks for taking time today. I wanted to get you in on an interview, talk about Vue.js. Of course, Fritz is a core team member of the Vue.js. So how would you describe yourself?
Okay, I would describe myself as a man, early 30s.
Yep. Professionally, if we had to narrow down.
Let's see. I do two things mainly. That's consulting. So I help people build applications and especially front ends that they can be really proud of and that really serve their customers well. Specializing in the front end, and I used to, once upon a time, specialize more in data visualization and animation. Lately, since most people know me for Vue work, people bring me in to help them with their Vue applications. So that's my main focus right now. And I also do a lot of open source work for Vue and just with other like little projects that either will help me develop easier or help other people develop easier. I really, since I do a lot of development myself, it's all ultimately selfish. I want to make my own life easier and improve my own workflows. And so a lot of the open source work that I do does in the end, contribute to me personally and make my job more fun.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that a lot of us think in the back of our heads that we should be contributing to open source. And the actual part of doing it, I think, is harder for a lot of people. How did you get started doing open source work and getting into the Vue.js ecosystem and starting to work with those guys?
Gosh, well, I started doing open source work back in the Ruby community. And I was working on Rails applications and a lot of other like little Ruby applications. And then as I started to get more into front end stuff, because I found that I really enjoyed like building the interactions with users specifically, like more than I enjoyed building like API endpoints and jobs turned in the background and all sorts of other stuff. Managing databases, I don't like that as much. Had to do it sometimes though. But I really like building those interfaces and those interactions with users directly. And at the time that I started using Vue, I was primarily using React for a lot of my UIs. And when I discovered Vue, I found that it could make me productive in some ways that I wasn't productive with React at that time, having used it for about 2 years, over 2 years actually at that point. And so I started contributing to Vue because there were some things that it didn't do that I needed it to do, or there were some parts of it that I wanted to be better for, just making my life easier, as we talked about earlier. And I think that was in late 2015, and then early 2016, Evan opened up a core team. He realized like, okay, like Vue's becoming like kind of a thing, and I can't do this all on my own. And so he invited me and some other people who are already contributing to the core team to basically make it easier for us to communicate and also make it so that he didn't have to like micromanage people as much. So, there's some work that he could just trust us to do and he didn't have to like look it over and approve it, that kind of thing. And since then it's grown a lot.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few core contributors to the product. I mean, that's one in the early days of Vue, which you probably know better than anyone. There was some worry that if Evan ever got hit by a bus, then all development of Vue.js would stop. But I think at this point, it's not the same.
Yeah, people have been very concerned about his health, and particularly about buses. Yeah, but fortunately, he lives in the United States where we have typically very poor public transportation. So, out of anywhere in the world, he's relatively safe here.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it would. I think his health is okay. I believe he'll be fine.
And
Don't worry about it.
The health of the project is pretty good too. We have a lot of people contributing to all the different repositories that are in the Vue ecosystem. And so there's, if Evan did get hit by a bus and hopefully was just like, out of commission for a little while, it would certainly be a tragedy for Vue and for all of us who know him personally. But the project would live on, and there are so many people using it at this point. Like that's another thing. Like it wouldn't be allowed to die.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, Evan, you obviously the creator of Vue.js from the beginning, from his humble beginnings. I believe he worked at Google for a while, and
he also worked for Meteor.
Yeah, I don't. And you just came back from, speaking of Evan and the community, you just came back from VueConf from the US. What was that?
Oh yeah, that was great. That was in New Orleans. And that was actually my first time in New Orleans. Beautiful city. I like it when I can go to places in the United States that don't feel like every other place in the United States. And New Orleans is definitely one of those places.
And what was your talk on?
My talk was on, let's see, 7 secret patterns Vue consultants don't want you to know.
It sounds
very clickbaity. Very clickbaity.
As soon as you got me hooked there. So, can you? I don't know. I'm going to put you on the spot. Can you name like one off the top of your head that you mentioned?
Yeah, so let me try to keep this straight, because I gave 2 different versions of that talk, one at VueConf and another one at Spotlight Vue.js earlier that month. And I gave a lot of tips in common, and some tips were a little bit different. So you should watch both of those videos if you want to catch all the tips.
I'll put a link in the description for both of them.
But one tip, I think this is the first one that I go over, and one that's relatively simpler, so more people can get something out of it, is with watchers. The value of a watcher can not only be a function, but can also be a string, which you can use to provide the name of a method that you want to call every time this property changes. And it can also be an object where you can provide a handler and also additional options like immediate true. So for example, if you're calling a method onCreated in a component, and then you also have a watcher that whenever something changes, you want to call that method again, you can actually consolidate that into a single immediate watcher. So that'll be called as soon as the watcher is registered, essentially onCreated, and then also as whenever that particular property changes. So it's just something that reduces some duplication in your code, helps you organize things a little bit better, and that's one of the simpler ones that is maybe a little bit easier to explain without visuals. Hopefully.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, it's definitely a lot of the topics. It's easier to explain with code, but from what I've seen, yeah, that was definitely a helpful one for sure. The watcher, I just kind of in general with watchers and computed properties and things like that. Do you have any recommendations when to use one versus the other?
Great question. So I'd say whenever you can use computed properties. Computed properties are usually the thing that you want to reach for. The cases where you might not want to use a computed property is if, for example, you need to do something asynchronously when data changes. So let's say you have an input, and whenever the user types something new into the input, you want to call an API that returns some autocomplete results. That's something asynchronous that you want to happen because the actual AJAX call takes time, and then it takes time for the results to be returned. And that's something that you would handle in a watcher rather than a computed property. But anything that's basically just like a formula where you want to return a value is going to be in a computed property. Yeah, I guess also if you wanted to have side effects, which you generally want to avoid, but if you are not going to have a pure function, if you want to directly manipulate the DOM in some way, or interact with some outside system, that's something that you should typically do in a watcher instead.
Yeah, that's interesting. On finishing a book, which thank you. You've wrote a great foreword for, so people will be interested in seeing that. I think I touched on watchers, but I didn't really go into it much. I focused more on computer properties because I just feel like, at least in my personal projects, I haven't used too many watchers. But it's definitely a concept that you run into as you start creating more complex Vue.js apps.
Yeah, I'd absolutely say that in the vast majority of cases, the thing that you want is going to be a computed property. And I will also say that Sarah Drasner on CSS Tricks recently wrote an article about like computed properties and watchers and methods and when to use each of them. And I highly recommend that. That's worth a Google. Again, that's on CSS Tricks, written by Sarah Drasner, about computed properties, methods, and watchers.
Yeah, that's another thing. That's a good point. I'll have to link that in the notes, because sometimes people think they get methods confused with computer properties, but you can't like pass stuff into the computer property like you can with methods. And, I mean, there's other differences too.
Yeah, and some people also have questions like, so like I use especially if they're newer to JavaScript. So like I use parentheses to call a method, but I don't use parentheses with a computer property, even though like both are defined as a function. You know, and,
that's a good point too.
And so she goes into a little bit of explaining how like computer properties are getters and explaining what getters are, as opposed to, you know, methods, which are just like raw functions that you're calling.
Yeah, those are good. I think, you know, when I was in the Ember.js days too, there was always questions of when to use computer properties versus their type of watcher too, if I remember correctly. Yeah, very interesting topics, kind of nitty gritty of Vue.js. Let me shift gears here for a minute. You had talked a little bit at the beginning. I think I mentioned that you are also a Patreon user. How can you tell me a little bit about why you started a Patreon? And I know that other developers out there are doing the same thing. For example, Evan Yu, which we mentioned earlier, who also has a Patreon, which helps support him. What was your decision making on that, and how's that going?
Yeah, so the reason I started the Patreon originally, before I started, about a month and a half ago, I was doing 80% consulting work and 20% Vue work. And I find my consulting work really valuable to keep me like grounded, and so that I also enjoy building stuff. Like I enjoy building actual applications, and without the experience actually building stuff, my work doing Vue wouldn't be as effective. But I would like to flip that ratio to 20% consulting and 80% Vue work, because there are just so many things, and a lot of things that just take long stretches of time that I could do to further improve people's development experience, further improve documentation. And so I started that to try to flip that ratio. Right now, I believe I'm at something like $800 out of my goal of $5,000, which is still something. I'm already able to spend more time on Vue than I would otherwise, but I'm still a little ways from my goal, and I'm hoping to get more patrons soon. Would love any tips if you have any. And I've been talking to Evan and other people in the open source community who have Patrons as well, and just sharing tips and tricks, because it is difficult. My open source work by far is the thing that brings the most value, but it's also, strangely, the thing that's hardest to get paid for the value that I provide.
Yeah, that's interesting kind of dichotomy there. I mean, how do we support people that are creating these amazing tools, are building these communities, building these frameworks? How do we support them? And then do we support them individually? I know some open source people create books, I mean, do you think that's the way to go? I mean, how do we support people that, other than just using their products and maybe contributing? I mean, there's obviously documentation and stuff like that. I guess that's a pretty broad question.
So Yeah, I have thought about that. I have thought about like creating a book, and I've talked to a lot of publishers about that. But in the end, I decided if I'm going to create like better resources to help people learn to use Vue, like those resources may as well be like official resources that everybody can use for free. And I'd really like that to be the case. I'd really like to keep everything that I make free rather than having, a paywall up for some of my best content. And that is really hard, but I'd really like to see that happen so that everyone has access to really like first class documentation, development tools, just educational resources to help them build anything that they'd like to build, and make it easy to get questions, and also to provide answers for people who like discover like interesting patterns that they'd like to contribute back to the community, facilitating that kind of thing, and also facilitating like global Vue events and things like that. That all takes time, and it's really valuable for the community. But it is hard to make money off of, strangely.
Yeah, I think it's though where you can, if you give out, I don't know if there's a law of reciprocity in the universe, but if you give out enough information, you give enough free value out there, that good things are going to happen. I don't know if that's 100% true. It's a little woo-woo, but I think it certainly, the people that are consuming your information, the free stuff you're getting out there, the amazing docs that you're writing, that it will come back to help you. I know strategically, like, for example, with me, I have a YouTube channel. I've wrote books, and I used to blog for a while, and then I kind of stopped. But kind of every point that I do, I also look at, like, I give a lot of free value out.
Yeah.
But I also kind of say, if you want a little bit more, like, I have this paid course. I'm creating a course on Nux.js.
First taste is free.
So it does feel like it's not, you kind of have to be a balance of like, I'm going to give everything away for free. If you guys want to have over 200 videos on my YouTube channel, you can watch any of these videos to pretty much learn almost everything I know. But if you want a little bit more, then you can pay to get it. Or if you don't want to pay for everything, like I said, everything's for free, you can also join my mailing list, and then we can have a more of an interaction there too. So I've been thinking about those things too. It's definitely a balancing act.
Yeah. Thank you, by the way, for creating all that free content. Like, one of the reasons that the resources for the Vue community are so great is because of people like you who are, just putting stuff out there, sharing their knowledge. That's fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to get better at it, trying to learn more and figure out the best way to deliver that content, and that's really cool. There's a couple of other really good YouTubers too that are putting out great information on Vue. Maximilian, have you heard of him? Yeah, he does some really great courses on Udemy. There's some really cheap, good courses too. You have to pay for those. I don't think there's any free Vue.js courses. And I know there is. I saw on the front page of, and I think you're involved with these guys.
I think his Udemy course often goes on sale for $10.
Yes.
So watch out for that.
And by the way, I do have links to his courses in the description below if you're interested. And it's an affiliate link, so I get a couple bucks if you end up buying it. So
nice.
But are you affiliated with this Vue.js school that opened up? I thought I saw it in the front page of Vue, Vue.js.org.
I've helped them with some of the technical reviews for their materials, but really the vast majority of the work is done by Alex and Rolf, who are the two leaders of Code School who make it, or sorry, the two leaders of Vue School that make everything happen, and they develop all the curriculum and stuff like that.
Okay, have you done any courses for them?
No, we've talked about doing a course, and I think I may do a course for them in the future. We just have to talk about timing, or actually, we have talked about timing, and I think later this month is when I might start having time. Hopefully, it always feels like, oh yeah, I should have time soon. I should have time. I should have more time soon. And then more things always come up. So I'm doing my best, and I have talked to them, and I would like to create a course for them, is the answer.
A few months ago, and you know, I was talking about courses and stuff. It might be something I end up doing, you know, one day, who knows, with them. So I guess the point being is that there's just a lot of great resources out there for people looking to learn Vue.js too.
Yeah, and also viewmastery.com is another great resource. They're producing weekly videos now. So basically doing kind of like a Railscast or Laracast style of video, where there are these like weekly tips and walking through like different features of Vue, different things that you can build with Vue, that kind of thing. Highly recommend it. That's from Greg Pollock and Adam Jar. Greg is was the founder of Code School, by the way. So if you've watched Code School videos to learn how to do web stuff, like I think all of my favorite videos from Code School were by him. And so I'm so excited that he's producing material for Vue now. That's like a dream that I couldn't have even imagined.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I saw Greg is doing this stuff. I don't know him, but I know a couple people that know him, and I was a big fan too of the Rails for Zombie stuff that he did way back in the day. Before, that might have even been before Code School. I remember now. Do you remember that?
Yeah, Rails for Zombies. I think that was. I mean, no, I think he did it before Code School, and then it was like brought into Code School, because it wasn't Code School eventually.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell because they had such unique branding for each individual course that I don't remember if the first time I saw it, it was actually part of Code School or not.
I should reach out to him and talk to him just to interview him, because it seems like he has a very interesting kind of parallel. It seems like he was a developer and then got into entrepreneurship and created this pretty successful company and then sold it to a Pluralsight, I believe. Mm-hmm. And now he's working on all these other things. Yeah. And yeah, this Vue Mastery stuff looks pretty slick. In fact, they have a pretty cool cheat sheet. I downloaded it, and full confession, it took some inspiration from that cheat sheet and created my own cheat sheet out of it. So yeah, I was giving credit where credit's due, because I'm like, yeah, he's going over everything I really need to go, all these different, like I change it. I changed it around, but I feel like I need to give him credit for that because of how good. And I guess he has a newsletter too.
Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah. So Vue Mastery is helping us with the Vue newsletter now, and also with they record a podcast, like a 5-minute podcast out of the newsletter every week as well, which is really great. Damien Dulish also does I think he's the primary curator for the newsletter. So shout out to him as well.
All right. Does he have conf? Did you guys end up all talking together? He was there because he has videos up on that.
Oh, Greg?
Yeah.
Yes, he was at VueConf. Yeah, he was one of the speakers, and he also made a really cool like interview compilation where he talked to a lot of the people who were at VueConf and just asked them like what they were excited about that was coming up in the Vue community.
Very cool.
So I definitely recommend checking that out too if people are interested in. I tweeted about it sometime.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, we'll wrap this up here. I did have one other question. If you could give a new to Vue.js 3 tips, that could be beginning tips on how to get started. It could be just general recommendations. What 3 tips would you give to a new Vue developer, someone trying to get into learning Vue.js?
Got it. So is this someone who's a new developer, period?
Yeah, let's say he's a new developer, sure.
Okay. So if you're completely new to development and you don't know any JavaScript or anything like that, I will say it might be a little bit hard jumping into Vue right away. I might get started on some JavaScript fundamentals first. On front-end masters, there are some good courses. Wes Bos also has some really good materials. You Don't Know JS is a book that is a little bit more technical, but if you really want to like geek out about this stuff, you can get into that, and that's available for free online. Once you feel a little bit more comfortable just like working with JavaScript, working with HTML, CSS, that kind of stuff, I will say that to get into Vue, I just recommend read the docs and just spend one day. Just spend one day going through the guide. And if you're not like happily building lots of cool things by the end of that day, then you've given Vue a try. You can stop. But really, just one day, and people find themselves extremely productive. I am really, really proud of what we've been able to do, and we're constantly improving it all the time. A lot of people in the community rave about the docs, so if you haven't checked out Vue, definitely check that out. And I also hear that there are some good books out there for Vue. Erik, would you happen to know about one of them?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Yeah, definitely Vue.js in Action too would be a great way to go.
And
the official documentation is great.
Something that I do appreciate about Erik's book is that it's extremely visual. So for people who don't want to read like a big like block of like text and then code and then text and then code, he actually like annotates a lot of code, and he has a lot of diagrams where he introduces the various concepts that are important to know in Vue or when building like front-end applications in general. So even if you're like pretty new to development, I'd say Erik's book is a good place to go. And he also shares like other resources that you might want to like learn about specific things.
Awesome. So yeah, and I did not pay to say that. Thank you so much.
He did not. He has not paid me a cent. I can confirm it.
Thank you. So you kind of going back to the question. So number one, you would say look at some of these great resources like Front-End Masters, like You Don't Know JS. It's a little bit more difficult, but then after you transition from there, start with Vue.js, read the official documentation, look for other resources like my book and some of the ones we mentioned earlier. And what would be like the third tip, you think?
Ooh, third tip. I'd say my third tip would be have fun. Like build things that you want to share with someone you love. When you're learning, that is one of my favorite tips, because those are the things that will make you keep pushing your limits of what you know and what you're able to do. And having that social validation makes me want to like go one step further and like see the smile on someone's face when they see this thing that I made for them, or maybe just something that they'll enjoy. If it's, I just want to have like, some kind of like funny like cat picture generator or something like that. Like, and it'll make someone smile. I get so motivated about projects like that. So if you're not sure, like, oh, I don't know if I could find the motivation to like, really dig in and, do a lot of this stuff, like find something you want to share with someone you love, keep that in your mind, and that will pull you all the way through.
That's awesome. That's awesome advice. Thank you so much Chris. So where can people reach you? Where do you want to be found at?
Where do I want to be found at? That's a funny way of asking it. So you can find me on Twitter at Chris V. Fritz. You can find me on GitHub at Chris V. Fritz. And that is CHRISV as in Victor. Actually, it's in Vincent. That's my middle name. And then Fritz, FRITZ. And then you can also find me patreon.com/Chris Vue
All right. Thank you so much again for jumping on the phone call, and I appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me, Erik.